Alright, hi there. It's me, Vampire Logan. I have just decided to do, well, not just decided, but I have decided to do a new show. I'm calling it Vampire Logan Auspex. It's basically going to be a show about where I just talk about gaming, and initially I'm going to talk about my history of gaming and things I'm into. And then I'm going to explore other topics related to D&D and other games, and maybe even discuss some game design and things like that. First, I was going to give you a little description of why I called it Auspex. So it's basically the idea is the word Auspex is so the tagline is going to be a show where I use my keen vampire insights into D&D and other gaming related subjects. And the reason I use that is because Auspex has two different dictionary or meanings. One is the dictionary description, which is an ancient Roman official who acted as a soothsayer or priest, responsible for interpreting omens or giving guides to decisions. So that's kind of where I'm feeling this is hopefully going to go. And then the other one is Auspex is a discipline from the White Wolf vampire game, which grants a vampire supernatural senses. So in another aspect of it, I'm borrowing something from that game, which my Vampire Logan is the name of my character from a vampire game long ago. So that's where I got the name. So I thought I'd start a little bit with some of the history, my personal history with gaming and game development as well, and then maybe move into a little bit of information on my history with D&D specifically, because I'm really into that right now, and I'm running a D&D game every Tuesday night from 9:30 till midnight Pacific Standard Time. So if you want to check that out, that's my main show right now. And hopefully this will also become another mainstay show. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it on Wednesday nights or not. It seems to be, I have 3 shows Monday, Tuesday, so a third show on Wednesday would be maybe a little bit much in a row. So I might move it to another day, but I just wanted to get this out. I've been procrastinating on doing this for a while now, so because it's revealing it like personal information, I'm kind of a little nervous about that, but I wanted to get it out there and get kind of an idea of if that's something that people might be interested in hearing about. So my history in gaming, I've been gaming since a time when the clothing was a little different and the graphics were a little basic. You may know this time. There was a thing called arcades, and you have to go outside of your house to go play video games. There was a few games that some people might remember. Dragon Slayer was a big one. There was an original Star Wars game with vector graphics. I think a few people know the ones I'm talking about. These were the arcade games that I got into, and later on I still had some experience with arcades as games changed and improved. But that's where I kind of started. I don't really want to date myself here, but it's pretty obvious from that. And at the same time, I was also getting into about the age of 13 or so. I got my first D&D set, which was this red box set here. It was pretty cool, and I got all my friends into it, and it was just a big opening of creativity, of being able to run a game. I've been DM pretty much most of the time since I got the game, and it's been a big part of my life for a long time. And then there was a bit of time where I couldn't couldn't or didn't have the time, or just people moved away and couldn't find the time or the people to play with. But I started out with this red box set, and then I went back and bought these other the gray or the brown books, as I call them, and also that one Eldritch something or other. Anyway, there was another book that was a Deities and Demigods, I think it was. So I got this box set, and then I bought the other boxes as soon as they came out. So there was a blue one and a black one, and I don't think I ever got the epic one. And after a while, I found out about Advanced D&D, which was also out at the same time, and so I was hesitant to get into that because my players were already used to me using this game. And so I ended up getting the Advanced D&D first edition book, and then, but I didn't like everything that was in there. I kind of like some things from original or from the D&D basic and from Advanced. So I made my own early on. This is probably at the age of 14 or so. I made my own rule system that combined all the things I liked from both rule sets, and I even wrote up a booklet or a binder of all my rules, handwritten with pencil, and I would change it as I go if I found things I liked or some things weren't balanced. So I started game balancing games quite early, and it was really fun. I really liked doing that, making rules, and I kind of think that was the impetus for me to go into the game industry, although I was not able to get into that until much later. But back here in the 80s, I was into D&D, and then we got lead miniatures back then, and would play on a one of those Chesic dry erasable grid boards, or roll-up grids, which I had both the hex grid and the regular grid, and we did our overland travel stuff on the hex grid, and then we did our combat stuff in the other one. And so we could take any module, and I could draw out the map as we go, and the players would play, and it was a lot of fun. Also around the same time, I was into strategy board games. I think the first one I got really into was Risk, and then there was many others that came after that. And then video games, I got into a lot of those as well. Originally video games for the PC. I had an Apple IIe originally, and so I played a bunch of like RPG type games, and Ultima was another big one. I didn't have a PC when I first discovered Ultima. I think it was Ultima 3, but my friend had Ultima on his Commodore 64, and so I would go over to his house after school, because he lived right by the school, and I would go play for endless hours Avatar. And I did up to the Avatar. I think I played on his computer, so 3 through 5. And those were such good games. Ultima 3 through 5. And then and that was kind of like the first sort of role-playing video games, so combined elements of the leveling up parts of role-playing and playing a character in an expansive world. Graphics seemed really amazing at the time, but now they're pretty dated. But that was kind of my first big video game session, and I would play that sometimes. Like, I wouldn't go home. I would like stay at my buddy's house and then get up and go to school the next day, playing most of the night. So, hey, look, not a lot has changed. It's 1 a.m. here. Anyway, so Ultima. If you haven't seen this before, Ultima 3, I think it was. Exodus? No, I think I started on 4. Ultima 4. Yeah, it was this Quest for the Avatar. And then Ultima 5, Warriors of Destiny. So this one, look at these graphics. Isn't that awesome? I love this game. Oh my god, it was so cool. just traveling, like going onto the ship and traveling from land to land, going into these towns. It was just, there was dungeons and stuff. It was just amazing, and obsessive. Like they didn't come with like a built-in maps in the game or anything. So me and my buddy, we would map out the dungeons on graph paper as we went through them, and then we'd be able to go back and find our way through them again. It was just, we spent so much time. I had a whole binder, I think I still have it, that had all the maps that we had built and all the notes we had taken. Back in those days, you had to kind of take notes to keep track of what you were doing in the game, because sometimes we would have to leave it for a few days and you'd come back and forget what you were doing. This the epitome of open world game, and Ultima 5 was even better and more expansive. And then one year in high school, I got a Apple IIe as a gift from my grandparents, and it wasn't as good because it couldn't do all the PC type games, but I managed to find a game called Demon Winter. I wonder if that's up here. Demon Winter. And that game was pretty cool. Demon Winter. Is it this one? SSI, yeah. Yeah, there it is. And I had an amber screen, so I didn't even have color, even though the game was in color. So I had to play this with like monochrome amber color of everything. And as you can tell, it's pretty basic. But yeah, that game was really cool. And then there was another one called by Alan Dean Foster. Video game. It's a really old one. Was it called Dig, was it? Shadowkeep, that's what it was. Yes, this game. This game was really different, and I was able to play that on my Apple IIe as well. And this was one of the first games that had the semblance of 3D. So you're walking in first person down these hallways. Oh, these bar guests, they always appeared when you least expected them. Yeah, and so it had an actual like 3D map, but it was really 2D, but with 3D like walls and stuff. And oh, and this stupid thing. Wow, also helps with the purchase. Weird creature. Yeah, that was a fun game, and I did a lot of notes on this game while I was playing it too, and it was based on a book, I think, that Alan Dean Foster had written. Yeah, he never... Novelization of the game. Oh, so he did a novel after the game. Yeah, that was... Oh, 84. Yeah, that was cool, and so I got into just so many games after that. It's hard to keep track. After these kind of RPG fantasy games, I started to get into strategy games like Warcraft, the original Warcraft, and Age of Empires, and StarCraft. And those had sort of the combination of the feel of playing a board game with a little faster pace and the cool fun stuff about you know, sci-fi and fantasy and strategy, turn-based stuff where you could plan out your moves. And Civilization came a lot later for me, but it was one of the early ones that I got into. And then I never really played any of the other ones. I think I played Civ 1 or 2 or something like that, and never continued with it. I think I played 4 a while back, 3 or 4 a while back, just to get that nostalgia. But I remember it was kind of, it was weird with all the stacking the things on one tile. It just wasn't, after you played like Warcraft and StarCraft, it just with individual units moving around on their own, it's a little bit clunky. But yeah, I played a bunch of that, and then Warcraft 2 came out, and then Warcraft 3, Frozen Throne, and the quality of Blizzard's story just kept getting better and better, building on the world of fantasy. And then they had World of Warcraft, which was a huge jump. But before that, my first MMOs were actually the first MMO I actually really did was a really bad one. I hate to say it, but it was the Sims Online, which was a terrible game, and hardly even a massively multiplayer online game. But it was my first experience with it. I didn't like it. I had played The Sims a lot before that and spent a lot of time modding The Sims and making things like I got all the X-Men skins that people had made and fixed them up and then put them in and made the X-Men mansion. That was fun. I think I tried that again in Sims 2 or 3. I got into the other games as well for The Sims, but after spending all the money on the expansions for the first game, I just didn't want to do it all over again for the other ones, so I kind of just petered off on that game. And although there were some cool things like with the aliens and weird events and stuff that would happen, it's mostly just a tedious kind of game after you've played it a lot. What else did I get into? And I guess I always wanted, from the time I was a kid, I guess up to going to college, I really wanted to work in video games. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I definitely wanted to make games of some kind. But what I ended up doing is I went to school I was going into commerce to be a accountant because I thought that would make good money. But I went through that and I just found it so boring and dull that I just couldn't handle it, because really my dream was to make and create things. There's not much to be done. In fact, if you're creative in accounting, that's probably not a good thing. But it was about second year university when I realized, yeah, this is not what I want to do. So I ended up dropping out there and taking a year off to work and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I was looking around at schools that were doing like game development programs, but they were all really expensive at the time, like 10 times the expense of regular college. So I just couldn't afford it. So I ended up going into what I could find was the closest thing, which was to get into programming and IT. And I went to BCIT because I could finish it in 2 years, and I didn't want to spend another 4 years after already wasting 2 years and then a year off. So I did the 2-year program there to get into IT. And for my option, I took expert systems, which was the closest thing to doing what I wanted to do, which would be AI and programming for games. So that was the closest I could get through the regular system. But then I ended up, after finishing my college with pretty good marks, I ended up getting a job. I kind of spammed all the jobs I could find for programmers, and at the time it was really hard to find a job for a programmer. It's not so hard now, but there just seemed to be a lot of people going into it at the time. And I had taken only a 2-year program, whereas most programmers had taken a 4-year program. So I got a job, luckily through well, it wasn't really a friend at the time. I guess it was just someone who was looking for someone to do some software that he had already built, and he hired me to help him work on that software. Even though I hadn't programmed in the language that he was using, I was able to pick it up in a couple of days and start coding on it. So it was a good first step. But that only happened after a few years working in just regular like help desk kind of jobs, where I was trying to get into programming, couldn't find anything. So I took an AS400 management support position. Basically, I'm supporting a mainframe as the technical support person, and managing it and doing reports and stuff like that. So it's kind of boring. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. Working a lot with databases, and so after a while, I've tried to like move up in that job and not getting anywhere. I ended up taking that job to do programming for the first time after I'd done all that training, and that really helped me get kind of a start on getting into the world of programming. But that job did not last, and when it ended, I moved on to another programming job that was in business software for fire departments, and that was pretty good. I stayed with that for a long time. I got pretty comfortable, but I didn't move up or anything, and I always still wanted to get back to games, so I kind of spent many years doing not what I wanted to do. Basically 13 years in business software is what from the time I graduated, and it just wasn't, I was starting to like get burned out, and they worked, pretty long hours in that as well. And so I almost decided I don't want to do programming anymore, but it seemed like a waste after getting all that experience. So I lucked out through a contact, a friend, my cousin got me a job working in the game industry with a new startup that was looking for someone to do project management, because I'd kind of gotten to the point where I was almost leading a team at my previous job, but never got the actual position. And so making this lateral move to the game industry, but doing that management role, is what I thought would be a good transfer for me. But what ended up happening is the guy really just didn't have any programmers, so he really needed someone to take on the programming. So I basically learned how to do game programming on the job at that job, and didn't go too well for the game that was being made, but I learned a lot from that. And sorry, wrestling game guy, but you helped me out, but I couldn't make your game the way you needed it to be made due to inexperience. But it did get a jump start for me to get into the game industry. And from then on, I was revitalized to love my work, and I was just back into it again. I really liked doing it. I really want to do game design. That's really what I'd rather be doing. But programming was already there for me, and it was pretty easy. So it was an easy switch. And through that job, I got into other jobs in small indie companies mostly. A few stints at like EA and Capcom, and larger companies like that. And all the way up to now, where I work as an AI programmer for a fairly large game company, which I won't mention. But it is pretty cool. I'm still loving it, and it's going pretty well. I'm finally doing AI, which I wanted to do for over 25 years. So I finally am doing it now. I did a little bit of one other job, but I after that I just kept ending up either doing database stuff or UI programming, which are two things I hate. So I've been doing a lot of stuff I hate over the years, even when I switched over to the game industry. But it was still worth it to get in and have a chance to do that stuff. So I really grateful for that chance. Then after that, well, I guess that's it. That's where I'm at now. And then a bit more of my history on gaming. So after getting into the game industry, funny thing about when you do that, when you start making games, you have less time to play them. So a lot of my gaming time dropped off a little, and having time for the game industry really kind of runs you ragged and puts you into the mindset where you always have to be working hard, working late, working overtime and extra time on the weekends. So you kind of lose any social life you had. So I had been playing D&D and other video games up until getting into the game industry, and once I got there, I kind of ended up the D&D kind of petered off. Also, people were getting older and having kids, and I wasn't doing that. So a lot of my friends got older and had kids at the usual age, And so it was kind of hard to do all that stuff, and there wasn't really a lot of tools like there are now for doing it online and stuff like that. So I kind of lost that, but I gained it back. I think briefly about 5 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And I started just like saying, okay, I'm not going to take any game industry jobs that force me to work a ton of overtime. And I just started just not doing it, and it turned out to be kind of okay. So they kind of just like let you do it, but then they also don't expect it when you just don't do it. Although it does run into conflict if other people in the company are doing that and you're not. It definitely is a culture thing that can cause problems or make it so that you don't get, you can get left behind by doing that. But it didn't matter to me. I wanted to just take it easy a little bit. So and then about 5 years ago I had kids, and it was about that time when I had started to see I worked at a company called I won't say what it's called, but it was a company that was doing the internet stuff for or not really internet stuff. They were doing services for people who are YouTubers and streamers, and so they would make services that would kind of help them grow their channels and stuff like that. Because I was very interested in that concept, and I learned a lot from that job. But what they really were having me do there is they wanted. But what we found was that one person could not do all the things that they wanted to have done, and they didn't want to hire artists, and they didn't want to hire other they had one game designer, and they didn't want to hire, and he was doing all the games, and they didn't want to hire other programmers, so they just didn't want to build a team, or they couldn't afford to. I don't know what the case was. So that job just didn't work out. They ended up outsourcing all the stuff to existing companies as contract work, which is probably better for them anyway. They didn't seem capable of handling a game team or knowing what that takes. And there's a lot of companies out there, small companies, that were kind of vulnerable to being nickel and dimed into doing more work than it is worth their time for, and then getting roped into commitments that exceed the value of what they're getting paid. So they managed to take advantage of a few places like that and get their work done that way, which I don't agree with, but that's just some of the nature of that business. And if you're ever thinking of getting into the game industry, look at other industries, because it is not a safe or it's a pretty competitive industry, and the rewards aren't unless you get a super hit game, it's pretty unlikely to be successful. But that's a sad story I don't want to talk about in this talk. The thing I'm doing is fine. I'm working on games that are successful already, so that's cool. And that's why you work for someone else, because you know they have already taken the risk, and you just get paid a salary and do your job. So that's kind of where I ended up with gaming and work and that stuff. When I got I was talking about the kids. So when I had kids 5 years ago, my dream had been to kind of transition into or have an additional income from doing streaming or YouTubing. Originally it was YouTubing, because there wasn't a lot of streaming stuff going on at that time, and so I just wanted to be a YouTuber. And I created my account back then, and I started doing a few recording with OBS. I tried a bunch of other software, but OBS ended up being the one I used, and it was a struggle to get it to work properly a lot of the time. So I would record something, and then I'd go back, and all the audio was trash or didn't work at all. So then it wouldn't work, and then it would just be, and there's no way to tell if it's working or not. So the tools they have nowadays are a lot better. Anyway, so then I had started that dream. I started doing a YouTube thing, making a YouTube channel, making like videos of me doing gameplay and stuff like that. I had at the time been watching a lot of uh, people doing XCOM stuff, XCOM 1 and Long War. And so I was a huge XCOM fan, like from way, way back when it first came out. And then the second version, the remake, was really good and way less tedious. So I got really into that game for a long time. And then the fan-based add-on or expansion, I guess, of Long War, which made the game more complex and more nuanced, kind of more similar to the original, with lots of different classes and things you can put on your troops. So I was going to do a whole series of me running through all of the Long War, which is a huge undertaking. And I got about 4 episodes in, and I just kept getting like technical difficulties, and like the audio would be destroyed. So I'd try and go re-record the audio. And I'd go into Premiere and just try to piece what I could together out of the video. And it was like so much work. And it was like, this just is when you're working and you have, and then I had kids at the time, and then trying to edit these videos, it was a pain. It was impossible basically. And it wasn't working either. That wasn't building an audience. I still only have, like at the time I think I had 13 people on my YouTube channel, and then now I'm only at 41. So in 5 years I've built up 41 subscribers. It is not although I didn't add anything for like 5 years, so who knows if it would have made any difference. But I'm going to try and do these kind of videos and put them up on my channel, see how they do, talking about that kind of stuff. So, and then after I wanted to do that dream, it just kind of died. And then I said, okay, well, when things calm down with the kids, I'll start up again, thinking maybe, after they turn to 1 or something, that it would be possible. But no, they're even more of a handful at 1 and 2. 3 was kind of the crazy time, and then 4 started to even out. And then when they got to 5, which they are now, I was like, okay, I can probably do this. Plus with the pandemic, freeing up, not having to commute, was freed up a little bit of time in the evenings late at night, like I am right now. So I restarted the dream and got my YouTube back up, and I realized that the better way to do this is to basically go into streaming, because Twitch was quite big at the time, and I started it like at the beginning of this year, so Twitch was already quite big. And I thought, okay, well, all you do on there is you just go on, you play your games, which I was doing anyway. I was playing Overwatch at night when the kids were asleep, and I figured, okay, I could just go in. I see other people, doing Overwatch streams, like Unit Lost and Your Overwatch and Frito and stuff like that. So SVB, all these guys were streaming Overwatch, and I was like, I could do that. That's just totally, not difficult, I thought at the time. So I thought, okay, if I do the streaming, then I can just, it'll be easier because I can just stream and then post the video to YouTube. And it was a lot easier to do that, because if you don't sit there and like plan it out and have to, do all this recording and stuff, all the tools kind of take care of that for you now. So now I'm here, I can do a stream and I can save it and I can put it onto my channel. So that works out a lot better. And as you can see, I've got quite a few videos of just me playing Overwatch. So not getting a huge amount of views on these things, but it's decent. It adds up over time. And it's pretty cool. But it's still not like taken off like I thought it would. I thought it would be easy, but it's not. It's definitely hard to keep an audience in this. And as I speak right now, there's like 1 viewer watching me, so I got to get this schedule worked out for this show. to I think probably I'm gonna do it on maybe on the weekend, because I have a little bit more freedom on those days. But Friday seems to be kind of a booked day, or just a random day. I never know what's gonna happen on Friday, so I might just keep it on Wednesday, or I might do it on like Saturday night. But I found that the best thing to do though is to pick a day and be consistent. So I'm gonna try and do that with this show. Alright, that was a long-winded kind of description of where I came from in gaming and in my career of gaming. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then I'm going to go into a little more detail with the D&D, and then I'm going to go into specifics with Critical Role, because one of the things I want to do is do recaps or like analysis of the Critical Role episodes. But I'll go into that after the break. So I'm just going to take a 5-minute break and be right back. Alright, I'm back. I was going to talk about my D&D kind of history of my interest in D&D. And as I said before, I started with the red box and the companions for that. But the real thing that kind of drove my D&D campaign was making my own world. And I started right off the bat working with a kind of a rough model of my world, and it kind of looked like, I don't think I have the original map, but it kind of looked like this. So let me just bring up this window. Okay, here's paint. So roughly my world looked like so like this. And I had a central place here, and then I had something like and this is about how it looked because I was really young at the time. I think dwarves was here. And this is literally what my map looked like for the first D&D world I created. I wasn't calling it Thoradin back then, but it was basically the same idea. So, and then I had humans over here and like some other monster races or something down here. So that was, and the center was like a city that all these races kind of joined in and meeting in. And so the adventures were, I don't even think I planned out the adventures. I think this was just like a rough idea of the world, and then we just role played whatever we wanted. So I don't think I ever showed anyone that, but that was what my world looked like in my mind. Yeah, but that's don't save that. Yeah, that was my D&D world, and that evolved into like 3 or 4 iterations of what is now my Thoradin world. And I think I can pull up an image in here. Oh, actually, I don't know if I have it on the drive. Well, let's see. Yeah, nothing too big there. I had some maps that I had scanned, but I don't have them easily handy right now. But I have another video that I did on that. I think I had that as a free thing you get for being a Patreon of my site. So if you want to see that, you can check out my Patreon. But it's basically a hex grid map where I drew out every little hex with mountains or hills or grasslands and rivers and stuff like that, bodies of water, and then wrote on there the countries and stuff that were in my world, and then planned out kind of in my head a lot of the political interactions between these countries and areas of land that I had yet to kind of decide on. And it was pretty extensive. I had about 9 I still have about 9 hex grid maps of 8.5 by 11 sheets that have my world kind of in 24 miles per hex mapped out. It's kind of extensive, like about the level of, I guess, the Forgotten Realms size. A lot of the stuff when I was doing my early world, I stole or borrowed or readjusted from Forgotten Realms because I like that one, I think, the most. A little bit from Greyhawk as well, and then a ton of stuff from fantasy novels and other sources, and then just things I just made up that I thought were cool. And yeah, it just evolved into through many individual campaigns with other player groups. I always kind of, I would play. I did some running of things in the in Forgotten Realms and other worlds for fun, but my main every time I could that people wanted to play would jump back to my D&D world that I had been putting together over time, over the years, and I'm still working on it to this day. But that was the funnest part for me, was just spending time on my own, kind of thinking up stuff, and unfortunately not writing most of it down, but thinking of it, planning it, changing it, using it in actual adventures that I ran with my friends, and sometimes with other people that I had just met in stores, game stores and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun, and a few times I did get to play as a player. It wasn't very often, but I had a friend who was running a long time game with his friends, but he always had people drop in and out. So I played with him, but his campaign was, he would always get annoyed if the players beat the enemy too quickly. So he would always throw super powerful stuff at the party, and usually someone would die. And as a new player, I would start at 2 levels lower than them. So I died, I think, twice in that campaign. I was just like, okay, this is not what I was. And I was playing really lighthearted player characters too, so it was not the best thing to play a lighthearted character and then have them die. But that was that game. And the other games I played in as a player were things like the Living World of Greyhawk and Living Forgotten Realms. There was a time when those were kind of on pen and paper and not online, and they were run by the Wizards of the Coast as a sort of global campaign. The interesting one with the Greyhawk was that they had actual, like, real world locations were a location in the Greyhawk realm, which was cool in some ways and not cool in others, because you'd be kind of stuck to this one place in the world, and if you didn't like that place, you had to move to get to play in another one or go visit other places. So it was cool when you had to go on trips and play with other people, but most of the time it was just the same place. But I had a character in there called Falendil. He was a druid, kind of a fightery druid, because he had high strength and was a wild elf. And I played him quite a bit, and we went on one trip down to Oregon so we could play in another place in the in the world of Greyhawk. I think ours was the Duchy of Ernst, and the place we went to was, I don't know, somewhere near there, I guess. And it was kind of cool to go down and meet other characters and play a game with them. And you have this sort of history of your character who's adventured with a bunch of random people from game stores that you met at that time, and then you just went to that other world and then interacted with a bunch of whole different bunch of people, and their world had different adventures and different problems and stuff. So it was cool to not have to, everybody in our area pretty much went through all the modules that were available for our area, and that was it. I think there was a few things you could do that were global, but whereas with the Forgotten Realms, everybody could do all the adventures, but it was kind of a little more cookie cutter, so it wasn't as, you didn't feel as invested in your character, I think. And I can't even remember that character's name that I did in the Forgotten Realms, or even what class it was, but I definitely remember Falendil. I remember we did a live action meetup of people who were in the living Greyhawk world, and we had a thing where we just go and we play our character live, and they didn't really have much like combat. It was just like a social gathering, so we got to like pretend to be our character and talk to other people who had characters in that world, and just sort of talk about your exploits and stuff like that. It was kind of cool. Casual tavern setting. Then there was another. And there's also like a lot of other games that I played at the time. I did a lot of White Wolf games. I did some Vampire for a while and Werewolf, and then after I played the tabletop for a while, I went and um, got into some LARPing of that, which is live action role playing, and that's with a full game system. So we would play. I don't think I played too much Vampire. Oh yeah, there was one Vampire. That's where I got my Vampire Logan name from. Was the character I played in this long running game. Basically was called the Thursday game because it was the one that was on Thursday in town, and we played. I played that for many years. I think about 4 or 5 years, and my character kind of moved up in the political hierarchy. But at the end of that game, I think I got a little complacent in my position. But the game master of that was kind of he was a good guy. He had taken over the game from another guy when I had first started. The other guy was kind of just had been there for years when I first started, and he was getting tired of it, I think. So he handed it off to the other guy, and the other guy was cool at first, but then he ended up letting a lot of people play powerful NPCs, and they would power game it and lord it over people. It was really it stopped being as much fun when he did that, and it would be fine if those people he let do that were didn't use it so much like as if it was their character. If they use it as to drive a plot, then it would have been cool. But I could never find out what the plot was. It didn't seem like there was a plot. So I think he kind of used it to give players like a powerful character without having to actually earn it. And he also was playing. This is another problem when you're in a LARP and you're playing one of the characters, you have to be prepared to lose that character, or you should be playing multiple characters. You shouldn't be really playing one. But he would always play the prince of the city, and I felt that was a little bit kind of power gamer move of him as well, because he was always the prince, and he always had all these because he knew everything about the game, so he could basically protect his character from anything happening, and no one could take over the prince thing from him, and he could give his character any amount of XP he wanted to. So it was kind of doomed from the beginning, but we had a lot of fun with it for a long time, and then he just it imploded, I think, because of all that favoritism and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it was fun for a while, and then after that I didn't really like LARPing for a while until I got into the Camarilla, which is the global based LARPing community, and I don't think I played Vampire in that. I think we played Mage, and we played Werewolf, and then I took over running a Changeling game for a while, and I did a similar thing. I had a character that was mostly my character, but I wasn't afraid to have that character be killed, and I think he did end up getting killed at one point, and but that kind of stuff happens. So it was a fun game for a while, but I couldn't keep up with running it. I think I was running out of ideas, and it was starting to get a little stale. It's just hard to keep everybody happy too, when you can really only do one main story and put your attention on it. If people are trying to do a bunch of stuff in the background, it's hard to keep track of what they're doing. I did bring on another guy who had lots of ideas, but he never really put in the work to do the stuff, so it just it was good to have him there as an extra storyteller to adjudicate things, but the work just didn't happen, and someone else ended up taking over that game, I think, or restarting that game. But yeah, it was fun for a while. And then what else did I play? I played some I did one or two games of a boffer LARP. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but people go out with blunt or foam swords and shields and hit each other with them in real time, and it's really light on rules, but more on the like your physical ability. And I found that a lot of fun. I liked the physicalness of it and the immersion of being in that world. But I only played it a few times, and then I don't know, I just never had time for it. It was always like a luxury of time, and it was a lot of work to kind of get set up. You had to get dressed up. You had to be full costume, and some people had like full makeup. If they were an orc, they'd wear green makeup, and it just seemed like a lot of work for me to. And the combats were like kind of fun, but then a little bit hokey because the people who ran the game had to get. What's that? Oh, it's just an alarm. I thought it was my kid crying. Yeah, so they had to get a bunch of volunteers to play the NPCs, and so there was a lot of work for the people running those kind of games, because in order to have like combat with a bunch of NPCs, you had to actually have people playing those. So, and sometimes people would take turns when they're not doing anything, they would play an NPC. But it just seemed like a lot of hassle to set up, and the end result you could have done way more in a regular non live action role playing game in that amount of time. So seems like cost effective time management was the thing that killed that for me. But the actual camaraderie and the interaction was a lot better, and the people acted in character a lot more. You had to be in character the whole time, and only go out of character very rarely if you had a rules question or something. But most of the time you're just like play through and then ask the questions later. But and again, I started in that at a low level, so I was kind of weak, and whenever I fought I would lose all my hit points right away, because I also wasn't skilled at doing the sword fighting as some of the more expert players were. So but it was a lot of fun. Kind of reminded me a little bit of when I first started playing D&D. We would go, like I was in Boy Scouts, and when we would go on hikes, we would do a diceless role-playing scenario, basically playing pretend, I guess, but we would be hiking along on a regular hike, but to keep which can be kind of boring, but to keep that boredom down, I would make up a story, and I would tell everybody what's happening and then ask what they do, and then I would just in my mind adjudicate whether they succeeded or not, and try to be fair to everyone. And it was a lot of fun. It kept us our minds occupied while we were hiking, and we did a lot of hikes back then. And one of my current viewers was also in one of those hikes with us. So poor Tias, if you're listening, that was you. If you remember. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, and I kept up that. I didn't keep up that tradition actually of playing just diceless role playing, sort of, I guess, with the LARPing. But when I had the kids, I sort of did a little bit of that concept with the idea of a make-up story. I would tell my kids stories and have them be a character in the story and interact with it that way. So it was a lot of fun. But it was not very conducive to sleep as far as bedtime stories go. So we had to cut it out at bedtime. I had been doing that for a while, and they just would stay up way later than they should. So now we relegate that to daytime only, and only when I have time. So that's a lot of fun, and my kids are still digging it. So I'm willing to do that. And then I also got my kids into some D&D type gaming. We called it Princesses and Palaces. I have 2 girls, and they like that, where they get to have a castle, and they have servants, and they have a stable full of pets that they have acquired, and they also have a dungeon below their palace which they can go in and kind of clean out or interact with the monsters down there, and then they go on adventures and go, fight evil and stuff like that, and they really enjoy it. So I started out using just a really light gaming system where we roll whatever die it is related to their level. So if they start out early on, they start with a D4, and later they get to a D6, and so on. And everything is just an opposed roll. So you roll their die and your die, and whoever wins succeeds. And then you can give them bonuses and stuff for magic items and things like that. So I was doing it all by the seat of my pants for most of it. I had some rough rules that I downloaded from somewhere, and then I added my own stuff to it. But I started to get to the point where I'd given them so many things that thinking of something new to give them was getting hard. And so it kind of petered off a little bit. And I wanted to get them doing actual D&D because they seemed to be handling that really well. And then we did, I think, 1 or 2 sessions of a D&D where they made up a new character and played D&D, but they were disappointed because they already expected to have all these pets and stuff like that. So I was like, well, there's only one class that kind of gets pets, but they only get one, so they weren't too interested in that. So we went back to playing the other game for a while, but I kind of tried to shift the rules a little more towards D&D. So we started rolling D20s for the attacks and stuff and that kind of thing. But it was pretty good. It's still going on, and we still occasionally play it. But I can't wait until they can get a little bit older so they can read and they can actually read the books and learn about the actual game. But there's lots of time for that. Where was I going with this? This is my D&D, my history of D&D thing. Kind of rambled a bit. But I guess the next part I wanted to move on to was, I'll take a little pause here, and sorry for when I cut this up. But I wanted to talk about my history with Critical Role. So I've been a gamer since way before any of those guys was even born, I think. And when I first heard about Critical Role, I believe they were already on, what was the episode they were on? I wrote this down. I think it was around episode 26, somewhere 25 to 26. And they were, I saw this show and I heard about it because I was watching a lot of YouTube stuff at then. And Geek and Sundry was one of my subscriptions. So I saw a lot of people talking about Critical Role. I was like, thought to myself, why would I want to watch other people play D&D? Why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone want to watch other people play D&D? Why wouldn't you just play? If you're going to spend that time of 4 hours watching someone else play D&D, why don't you just play D&D? And I, at the time, I thought that was weird, but I checked it out and I was hooked from just the one episode. I got it. It was basically their storytelling, and also they're like accomplished actors, voice actors. So of course their quality of gaming was a little bit better than some of the games I've had. We've had some good ones that have been pretty close to that. But the other thing I found about it was like, it was nostalgia for me, because basically the way they played D&D was almost exactly like some of my games of D&D that I'd had back in the day. So it was kind of a thing that brought back that kind of nostalgia. And I was like, and I wasn't playing D&D at the time, so I didn't really, and this was also around the time when just before I had kids, so I was trying to start up the YouTube thing, and I saw, hey, these guys are playing D&D and people are watching it. I could do that. So that was one of the ideas I was going to do for my streaming and YouTube channel. And I was so like, yeah, this could be a thing. And then what happened? I started watching it, and then I think the reason it worked, I think, was, yeah, I had less time to play, and it just was a thing that I could like get that feeling of getting to know other people's characters without really having to spend the time to make up a game, plan a group, do all that stuff. You could just tune into that show and watch them, and they were quite good at what they do. And the stories were like both. I mean, Scanlan was just amazing. This was season 1 or campaign 1, and Scanlan was just like my favorite. He just had the best, like the even though they were anachronistic, it was really good that he had these, every time he cast a spell he would do a song. And I'd seen some bards try to do that before in my games or in other people's games, and they'd do it for the first 2 sessions, and then it would peter off, and then they would just say, I cast the spell. But he kept it up the whole time, so I was very impressed with that. And then the other players were, I had certain characters I liked and certain characters I didn't like, but I ended up loving them all. And then, so I think I started watching a few episodes, and then I said, you know what, this is so good, I'm gonna have to go back and watch them from the beginning. So I went back to episode 1 and started watching, and by the time I think I caught up to real time at about 42 or 43. So I was I think I stopped watching them for a while, so I wanted to catch up before I would continue. So I started just watching them on VODs, and it was just, and then in November, this was probably about was it September, I think, or August? Anyways, around that time of 2015, I think it was, and they, so I went back and started watching, and in about the spring of the next year, I got caught up to about episode 42 or 43, and then I was able to watch it live or whenever they released the VOD, because I couldn't just watch it on a Thursday night. I had kids and stuff, so I couldn't really do that. But I would watch it whenever it came out on the VOD, and then I just kept up with it every week ever since. So yeah, having I had the YouTube account created, but having twins, it was so difficult to work in the time to try and do my own version of it. But now that I'm starting to run that game. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, but I have my stream on Tuesdays at my D&D homebrew stream on Tuesdays at between 9:30 and midnight on Pacific Standard Time, and that's been my like getting back to the gaming that I love, which is D&D. I love D&D, and I love gaming with my friends. I've been playing a lot of video games for a while, but mostly on my own, till I got into Overwatch, which happened around the same time, I think 2015. But I could jump in and play that and get out. It was a quick kind of jump in, jump out kind of game. And it was, it didn't have any, it didn't have any time commitment. That was the nice thing about it. Yeah, and then getting the game started was it took me a long time. I was gonna do it way earlier, but just first I had to see if anybody was interested. I thought for sure my two best friends would be into it, but one of them was, the other one wasn't. So I was gonna just start with 2 players, but I had one, and then another one said he would do it, so then I had 2, and then I was gonna just stick with 2, do a small campaign, but it took a while to put together. But once we got it up and running, it started to take off, and immediately after the first game, I was like, okay, this is you fall back into the DM chair, and you're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing now, and it just felt so natural, and that was the thing that my streams don't get a lot of views, but that one definitely got more views than all of my other streams. So it was still, only up to, I think the most I had was 9 or 10, but a steady average of 5 or so. So I realized, and all my other, I've been streaming since February this year, and all my other streams were like 1, 2, 3 viewers, at the most. And mostly because I was just streaming Overwatch or some other single player games that I was playing. And even giving away games for contests still didn't bring enough. It brought in a few more followers, but it didn't bring in enough viewing audience, which is what Twitch cares about. So, and I was trying to get to affiliate. That was kind of my goal. I thought it wouldn't be very hard because my buddy who started, or my wife's friend who started at the same time as me, streaming his gaming content, he got to affiliate in the first month. I was like, oh, I guess it's not that hard, but he had a lot of friends, I guess, who were into watching him, so he got it pretty quick. But it took me a lot longer, and I knew that the D&D would be a better thing for me, but I didn't expect it to be that good. So what I found out was that with streaming D&D, I had the numbers to be an affiliate, but all my other streams were dragging the average number down, because I would have a stream of like 1 viewer for like 5 hours of gaming in a night. So I had to like cut out all the other gaming. I moved some of it over to YouTube gaming, which doesn't care about that stuff. And so I did that for a while, and then after it sort of cleared out all the other chaff from my other gaming, it basically averaged out to the D&D stuff, basically made it reach affiliate. So I got affiliate a little over a month and a half ago now, and it's been going pretty good, but it's still, I thought, okay, once I reach affiliate, that's kind of the gold standard. But now that I've reached it, it still isn't like taking off like crazy yet. So the D&D is still doing reasonably well, but last game was only 2 viewers. Previous games had been, 5 to 8 player or viewers. But yeah, it falls and it ebbs and flows. So, and last night I had to start off. I didn't start on time, so that's another big thing I knew from learning about that from that job I had with the tools for YouTubers, that you have to be consistent with your timing for streaming. So I'm still working on it, still trying to get it going. But yeah, the Critical Role, they were doing really well, and it was increasing every week. Basically, their audience grew like kind of steadily, linearly, and then suddenly it just exploded. And I'm not sure what episode that happened, but it was just like, and then suddenly everybody was a critter. I would like run into, my wife would tell me there was a critter at work and stuff like that. So there was a lot of hype about that. And then so I loved campaign 1. It was like the best, even though it started kind of in the middle of their campaign. They had been running it for a couple years before they started streaming. And you can see some of those things with their Origins comic. I'm probably going to get that for Christmas. I still haven't checked it out yet, but that's something I want to do. And then then it got into this whole, one of the things I was really impressed about campaign 1 was that Matt Mercer, he's an excellent DM. I thought I was pretty good, but then when I saw him, it's like, yeah, he's got all the skills. He's got all the acting skills, the voices. I try to do voices for my characters, but it's definitely nowhere near his talent. Of course, that's his job, but that's something I might like to get into, is voice acting. But yeah, he had all those skills, and then he had the planning and all of the game mechanics, and the way he runs his game is very similar to the way I like to run mine. I'm a little looser and tend to be a little more silly, but pretty close. Anyway, so then season campaign 1, he was willing to let all the stuff he created, his main city and all the like NPCs he'd created in that city, and the grounding of his characters in that city of Iman, he was willing to come in and fucking destroy it, like no holds barred. He went in there, he killed like the leader or something, or his family. He killed like a bunch of NPCs that he destroyed the city. The Chroma Conclave just went everywhere, and when I saw that, I was like, that is some good, well thought out planning of a villain and how to get the characters invested in destroying that villain. The villains seemed impossible to beat at the beginning, and the only criticism I might have is it took a really long time to find a way to overcome those villains. And the way they did it was pretty cool, like going and picking off each one at a time. But I kind of feel like the villains, if you're going to make your villains dragons, they should be a little bit smarter, and they know that this party of adventurers is trying to take them down. I feel like they could have... They would have known that the players were doing that, and had spies or something that would have detected it. But I don't know, giving the players, letting them kind of figure out their own way is just part of the fun, I guess. So it doesn't need to be totally totally accurate as to what you would think would happen. So he just chose that and then said, I think he introduced it a little bit too soon, though. I think he should have done it, like the whole Vecna thing at the end was a good story too, but I think defeating those dragons seemed like a cooler set of final battles to me than the one Vecna battle. Although, actually, no, the Vecna battle is pretty awesome. And the walking city Titan thing was pretty cool too. That was pretty epic. So yeah, I guess everything I like about campaign 1, I like everything about it. Just a few things I think maybe could have been done different, but the way it was done was perfectly fine. And then campaign 2. So after I'd seen campaign 1, I kind of got a little bit sad at the end, because it was over, and I really loved those characters, and I wanted to see more of them. Luckily, they did a few one-shots which brought them back, and that was kind of cool and fun. But I missed those characters. So when campaign 2 came out, I was like, I was skeptical. I didn't think I would like them. They weren't the campaign 1 characters that I adored, and they were kind of, I don't know, there were a lot of, it started at the beginning, so maybe that's another thing too. They weren't really heroes at the beginning. They were just first level characters. So they were already kind of in a weak state at the beginning, and not just like, I think that the players were kind of a little bit nervous, because they'd been playing those other characters for so long and people loved them so much. I think they were worried that lightning wouldn't strike again. And so you could see that they were very cautious and nervous at the beginning. And then they just kept working on it. Like it was shaky, and there was a few characters I really didn't like. Like I really didn't like Bo. I was so on Caleb, but I liked the Caleb and not dynamic. Ford, I wasn't really, I don't know, I didn't know what to think of him. Jester, immediately loved her. Like Laura Bailey can do no wrong. She does not have to worry about anything she decides to roleplay. And then I didn't know what to think of Molly. I didn't like him at first, but he really grew on me. And by the time, well, this is some spoilers here. If you're watching this and you haven't seen all of Critical Role, campaign 1 and 2, then spoiler alert. But yeah, I didn't like him at first, and then I kind of did like him, and then he started to grow on me pretty quickly, like faster than any of the other characters that I didn't like. And then as I got into like, okay, he's got some cool backstory, some cool stuff is going on there. And then when I really started to like him, then he was gone. And that sucked. That really sucked. But if he hadn't gone, we wouldn't have got Caduceus, who I love Caduceus. I thought he was awesome right off the bat, as soon as he appeared. The other characters, Bo took a long time to grow on me. I really didn't like her for the longest time. I don't think it was until she became expositor that I started to like her, because I thought she was just, I don't know, too aggressive, too abrasive. But then later on, now I can't even think of saying that about her. She was just awesome. All the characters just ended up getting to be awesome. But yeah, their arcs, starting them out in a shaky way, I think probably helped the fact that their arcs were so grand. And with Molly coming back as a villain, that was some deep stuff. Yeah, that campaign 2 definitely slow start, but reached the peak fairly early on of being of returning to greatness. So that and I tried to watch that one with my wife, but just the time commitment is just so high. I end up not even being able to watch the whole episode at one time. I have to like space it out whenever I have time, like I'm doing laundry or something, I can watch the episode. So it always ends up being something I do over the course of the week before the next one. So she just didn't have that same drive to kind of watch it on her own. But I tried to get that going for the first couple episodes of campaign 2, and then campaign 3, I tried to get her into that too, and we watched the first episode, but the last half hour or so we didn't finish, and now it's been 5 episodes now, and she hasn't been able to catch up, so it's died off again pretty quickly. It's just so much time commitment for 4-hour episodes every week. That's a hard thing for a lot of people. That's why I wanted to make my show only 2 to 2.5 hours. We've had a couple long shows just to finish off some combat, but yeah, definitely keep it a little bit smaller. Not only for like, it's also a lot to plan to fill up 4 hours of just talking. Be a little hard on the throat. So anyway, now I'm going to talk about campaign 3. So, and it's getting pretty late, so I think I'm going to end this stream now, and then I'm going to do my campaign 3 talk next time. So I will figure out, as far as I know at this point, I'm going to say that the next stream will be on next Wednesday, if it isn't sooner. So I will figure out what's the best day for this stream, and then I will set the date and send out a tweet about it, and then I will schedule it for that day in the Twitch scheduler. So keep an eye on that if you want to keep up with this, and if you have any suggestions for this or anything like that, just if you're watching this as a VOD, I'm gonna put it over to YouTube as well. So if you're watching this as VOD, comment on it. Give me some pointers if there's anything you want me to talk about or expand upon. I'm going to definitely be doing a review of each Critical Role episode. I will have to, of Campaign 3, I'm going to have to catch up on that. But after that, once I get caught up, I'm going to do, the episode recap as a small section, and then I'm going to talk about other things that are going on in the gaming world, and also videos and stuff like that, and shows. There's one I've been watching lately called Arcane, the League of Legends one, and it is phenomenal. So I'm gonna definitely do an episode on that. I'm also gonna do one on some of the topics I've talked about here. So I might do a full episode on, like, stuff like D&D, DM world building tips, campaign tones and themes, game systems. Talk about some other game system I played, Vampire and other White Wolf games. I talked a bit about LARPing. I could go into more detail on that. So anything you guys think you might want to hear or see. Also, I'm going to maybe talk about some game design kind of discussions, both in D&D and in video games. So talking about some of the things going on with Blizzard and WoW and Overwatch right now. I definitely want to get into a little bit of analysis on that. I have some really good ideas, I think, and getting those out would be kind of fun and informative. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a good show, and I will see you next time. All right, have a good night.